Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the most benevolent, the most merciful. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. All praise due to the Lord of the worlds. Auzubillah shaitan rajim. May God protect us from the curse of one and necessary words. Rapid for me, my Lord. Forgive me, my Lord. Forgive my species for all the sins they are conscious of and unconscious of. Ihtana salat al-Mustaqim. May God guide us. Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's lecture. They lived for us, so we would live for them. What happens to you when you hear this sentence? I looked at the human species for some time, and it is very obvious that it is not a fully activated organism, and that there were human beings in the past that had, in some sense, their collective responsibility and honor had been activated. Do you know? In previous talks, I had mentioned that uh, the the kind of world the civilization we see in 2025 is kind of like a civilization that's been post-conquered. That means they divide and conquer, which is a strategy. And so on this planet, rather than being one collective honorable human species, managing the earth, we are fragmented. And a part of me has scenarios in my inner realms where I see like advanced coordinated movements of human activity. What that means is it's not too far fetched of an idea. It is not too far fetched of an idea that we should start thinking of humanity as if it is an empire. Now, immediately this sentence, draws the egos out, but in reality, it is not an empire where the king is man. There are many, we can say there are 8 billion ways to look at how a human experience enters the future. But, to me, some things don't make sense about how we're living. And the reason they don't make sense is they indirectly suggest the greater capability we have. You understand? That means from one angle, we see human beings fragmented, individual, egotistic. Everybody's kind of like, fighting for their own world first, and then trying to live in a common world. And so it's like when I look at human beings driving, you know, I see that all drivers, most drivers, they can for a second put away their ego and yield for another driver to come. That means we are not that ego obsessed of a species. The reason we are, in some sense, really holding on to our self worship and egotism is because we think it's our best strategy. See, that's why in one lecture I was like, "Yo, man, like when how we see human beings being able to drive." I'm not saying there are no accidents, but you know, a majority of human beings, understand the concept of yielding. Now, I guess this comes down to the notion of what if our egos are like vehicles, and sometimes in reality you need to yield. That means you need to let another ego go first, you know, or you need to consider factors that are more important than your ego. I don't know. This lecture is, I guess, more personal than impersonal because it's ultimately inspired out of an emotion. It's like, imagine armies of humanity living and dying for their continuity. How many human beings do you know from how many kingdoms in the past? Like the dude was a baker, right? Like baking bread. And then suddenly there was war and he had to pick up a sword and go to battle, you know? And when that human being was in the battlefield, it would be asking, what am I living for? And it's always for future value. Human beings go to war to kind of protect their expectations of the future. But you got to go further. Do you know what I think the biggest problem in the world right now is, even in politics and world leaders? They're not envisioning, they're not visualizing far enough. That means world leaders, even presidents, it's kind of I don't want to say it's kind of silly, but it's like, the human administration, let me say it this way, the human leadership is like every 4 years, right? But when are we going to have that political leader of a nation who's going to just one day be sipping tea, in the backyard of their, I don't know, presidential place, right? And they're going to just for a moment be like, yo, man, maybe 10 years from now, still we got a bad nations got to battle each other. But what if 50 years from now, 100 years from now? What sort of ideological conclusion, or what, like if we see the species as a value proposition, how would it be valued? See, the whole thing about human life is that you're seeing organisms, characters in a story value themselves in a certain way and then act in accordance to that value. You know, from one angle, sure, there are strong people, weak people, smart people, stupid people, but from another angle, it's just different variations of human expressionism, right? And when will we reach that point where we will start having an honor for the preservation of the essence of the human idea? You know, right now, human beings treat themselves as an object. Like everybody's probably heard this thing where, this guy hits on a girl in a bar or something, and the girl's like, don't objectify me. You know what I mean? And instead of the guy turning around and saying, don't subjectify me, it's like, if you don't want me to treat you like a certain object, then don't treat me like a certain subject, you know? But human beings have not reached that awareness where they're still where they can discriminate how a person is different from the idea of them, you know? That means so many people, they've been much better people in my mind than I've expected, you know? Sometimes in my inner realms, I feel like, my God, how generous, you know? It's like you see, let's say you see someone, you see like a beautiful woman in your mind, it's like, oh my God, she must be angelic, you know? You know, and you're like, is that a tattoo of horns on your? I don't know. There's something that when I wrote this title, they lived for us, you know, so we would live for them. It was as if I was tapping into my connection to something deeper than just my, I I guess, surface level relationships from this life. You know what I mean? There is something strange in the human being that even though we are every person is separate and unique, but because existence is being broadcasted from one place to us, I think there is I mean aside from memory, I mean it's kind of weird. It's like DNA, how do I say it? Somebody put this thing, they put this picture of a brain and all its nerve endings, okay, on a table, like it was a biology thing, okay, and the title and the meaning on the top of it said, "This is what's moving." And I don't know if you've ever seen a brain, like you've probably seen, like if I tell people visualize a brain, they're gonna just visualize like like something equivalent to a football. You know what I mean? Like they're gonna visualize something like that. But if you visualize with its nerve endings how it goes through the spine, it's kind of creepy. It's kind of like our brain is an alien in a biological system, but it appears that way, but it doesn't happen that way. It's not like some like alien brain suddenly entered our bodies and is moving us. Like I don't want to disturb the viewers, but there are, for example, there are like what a praying mantis is as an insect. Like there are these effed up worms that kind of go into the body and start controlling that entity. Okay. Now, anyways, the reason I'm saying this is because the human awareness, like the idea of us, is at a completely different class and position. You know what I mean? It's like, how do I say it? It's like a person trying to be pure, okay, but then they want to have children, and then they realize, okay, you can't be like that. You know what I mean? Like, so, anyways, where I'm going with this is I'm trying to suggest. Where's the music? Okay, you know, futuristic post-apocalyptic music is not bad. Guys, this is where I'm going with this. I'm pretty much saying, okay, we have this sentence that says they lived for us, so we would live for them. This means that we have a responsibility. Now, my question is, how many people, like, how are human beings in 2025 being responsible for their realities? I think this is a good question. And when it comes to, like, okay, what separates, for example, a mature human being, which technically means a more advanced human being than an immature human being. Okay. Let's start from the example of emotional immaturity. Okay. So, an emotionally immature person is someone who only their emotions are important to them. For example, you look at children, you know, you take away the toy, the child cries. You tell the child you can't play video games, it gets upset. It's right now responsible for the emotions of itself. So that's like a basic human being. That means anybody out there, if you're worried about your own emotions and your problems and everything in life, that's very basic. That's like the first level. The first level, okay, as a human being, you need to understand yourself. You need to understand your emotions. You need to understand your thoughts. You need to understand how you're simulating reality as a simulated entity. Okay. Now, the issue is most people don't graduate from this level. Why? Because in the external reality, in your outer life, okay, you have to survive. So you somehow subconsciously are under the impression that, it's you have to be, it's kind of like, I think it's a fair statement to say that the human agenda of a lifetime appears as a sort of self obsession to preserve oneself. But what's the point of preserving oneself if there's no purpose to that? You understand? Like, what's the point of, I don't know, maybe this is intense. This is intense thing to say, but in my mind, right, there has been moments where I have gotten angry. Okay, not angry, but kind of like, upset at the condition, at my own existential condition. And I'm like, okay, like right now I'm 33. That equates to like around 12,000 plus days that I've logged in. That means 12,000 times I've logged into this game, into the system. Okay. In these 12,000 times of logging into the system, at some point, I started to feel like at first comfortable with the repetition. Okay, you know, wake up, go do things, sleep. Wake up, go do things, sleep. Wake up, go do things, sleep. After like, I think maybe after like 7,000, okay, whatever. Let's say after, I don't know, after a ridiculous amount of opening and closing my eyes to this reality, you begin noticing patterns, okay? And you begin noticing patterns in the sense of human behavior, right? Like, I don't know what's really like kind of special about me giving these talks, but I feel that some part of me is treating humanity like a National Geographic show. That means for a second, I mean, I think this is natural, but like when I look at human beings, it could be even a small human being, okay? It doesn't mean they are not capable of something big, which means that when a human being sees another human being, they don't know what variables in their reality are known and what variables are unknown. You know, somebody in the chat section says gold and oil and food are extremely valuable objects. When a girl says don't objectify me, they assume that the object you're objectifying them as is a valueless object. No, no, no. I don't think it's just that. I think it's just that like if I treat you like a statue, you're gonna be like, what are you doing? But it's not. That's not the issue. The issue is that when human beings connect, they have inner lives and outer lives. In the outer lives, if they accept each other, then it's left for the inner life, right? But the inner lives are very different, and so human beings try to find commonalities in their inner life to kind of accept each other. But when you suddenly realize you are putting in the value in the stuff you're seeing, it becomes a bit different. You know what I mean? That means I could look at all the people I have thought were enemies or anything I felt that was an enemy, right? And I could in some sense be like, how do I know, that one frame of that person's film is them? You know what I'm saying? Anyways, going back to the idea that they lived for us. You know what that means? That means even if you were, excuse my language, even if you were treated like shit from the beginning of your life by human beings, you cannot ignore the fact that there were human beings living for everybody right now. Sometimes it fascinates me. Sometimes it fascinates me that all my ancestors, whoever they were, they managed to survive and get my DNA here. But when my DNA comes here, it's like oblivious to the effort that it took to get it. You know what I'm saying? For me, life has not just been about how do I evaluate myself, but it has also been like how in like how advanced I'm aware of myself, the possibility exists for others. You know, that means, for example, I experience my inner realm cinematically. So when I'm speaking, I'm kind of like it's easy for me. Why? Because I'm like seeing a video and I'm putting words to it. Okay, but I don't like. There should probably be people like I know that there's people with photographic memories. I don't know how those guys are kind of like happy. Yeah. It's like I remember everything. You poor bastard. I think this could be simply because I'm a person who didn't go to the military. I left Iran when I was young. If I was in Iran, I'd probably go to the military. For example, Rene Descartes, this philosopher, regardless of how much he wanted to do philosophy, he still went to the activity of some of his most profound insights happened in the barracks of an army. Okay, now I kind of understand that yes, we have like different intensities to reality. So, for example, there's like military soldiers, right? And then they have a sort of organizational situation. I remember seeing this video that was explaining how the military kind of resculpts the individual, and they showed that there was like this knot, this what do you call it? They took out the screw from this metal thing, right? And they completely filled up the hole, like kind of sandpaper the thing, and then you know what it is? It's kind of like they reset you. Okay. Now I firmly believe that human beings can reset themselves, and to be honest, it's kind of like this feeling of are we doing enough for what was done for us? That means our ancestors fought to keep our possibility of existing alive. How much are human beings fighting now to keep the future alive? People are just like, yo, man, just give me a comfy cave to hide in, before and wait this out. That's how human beings are. They're waiting it out. It feels to me 8 billion performers on a stage, but they're not performing. I don't want to say that like dictators were good people. I don't want to say tyrants were good people. But if you observe their inner realm, they had a bigger expectation on reality's form. Sometimes like right now, I'm in a Walmart parking lot, okay, and I'm just looking at people. And I ask myself, is this the most advanced that human beings can be? Just following their personal to do lists till before they die? Like, what is this? There are 8 billion human beings. That means 8 billion unique angles to humanity. And the civilization is not advanced and mature enough to, in some sense, realize the value of it. In an advanced civilization, the value of the human being is like, in some sense, the greatest thing they can do. Imagine Einstein. How many people looked at him and they're like, yo, man, buy a comb, right? And the dude wrote 2 essays and everybody shut the hell up. You know, they're like this drunk violin playing, you know, uh, no style, like not I should say yeah, that's style, you understand that style, but they're like this guy. I don't know. I'm. I think people, of course, people are influenced by different things. Something emotionally I'm influenced by is just how do I say it? In my mind, I have visions of big movies. Like, how cool is it when one human being like does something epic? Everybody's like, "Oh my god, film that, put it on YouTube." You know, like, have you ever thought about what a group of advanced beings would do? Have you ever thought about like how how an army of geniuses would fight? How you know what I mean? Like, there is so many ways that we can activate as a human being on Earth, but we on some level there's a species shyness of not being the first. I remember seeing this clip on YouTube, okay, and it showed this. I think it was a cheetah. Okay, there was this cheetah, all right, and there was like this group of I don't know what the term is, technical term, but it was like this herd of like this classroom. Okay, I don't know. They say school of fish. I don't know, like classroom of baboons or something. It was like these like vicious, like these violent savage monkeys, okay? And this cheetah comes to attack one of them. And it's so remarkable, this video, because it shows the alpha of the group runs towards the cheetah while everybody else is running. And the moment the first baboon attacks the cheetah, before it attacks like somebody else, all the other baboons get strength and they attack the cheetah. And the cheetah realizes it made a mistake. You know what I mean? And so I find it similar to humanity in the same sense of how the advanced humanity will happen. You see, right now, as I can't say there is no civilization. I can't say there is no organization. All I can say is that the advancement of humanity is not enough when behind its eyes it sees stuff that's more advanced. I'll give you an example. We, behind our eyes, can visualize flying cars. But in front of our eyes, there is no flying cars. Is anybody doing anything about it? No, only like a few people probably. Many moments in life I've kind of stared at the sky and asked myself, like, what are you living for? And I was like, okay, you have a value now. The world has a value. You have a known value. The world has an unknown value. Perhaps you're living for a value you will understand. That's kind of what I've told myself. But right now, it's kind of obvious that we are at the edge of a global human acknowledgement revolution. That means it's not like go in the streets and rebel kind of ordeal. It's a different type of rebellion, maybe a bit closer to how Gandhi rebelled, where it's not that you fight, it's that you change your behavior, therefore you end up somewhere else. You know what I mean? It's kind of like there are laws in this world that intensity has jurisdiction. That means there's some states like, some situations where a person can try to do something and it will never happen. It's not authorized. All right, guys, I need like a couple minute breather. I'll be back. You know, I don't know. I still find myself to be a human being that needs honor. I think honor is an important need in the same way that it's somebody who has a purpose functions with way more stability than somebody who doesn't, functions with way more conviction than it doesn't. The situation is kind of like you open your eyes in a world and then you decide how it looks like and then you decide how you're going to look like in it. Okay, people like we have this attitude. But to understand that the world is actually an unknown place and there are parts of it and sectors to it that are unknowable. So it's as if this simulation that kind of is it's like this limited simulation notices a limitless unknown world. It has to decide that if it wants to if it truly acknowledges an unknown world, it would be an unknown self. You understand? That means it's very difficult to say who you are if you don't see the edge of your world. You know, like we scale it down. We say we're humans on Earth. You know, we're beings in a cosmos. But that's just an idea we put on the massive unknown. And there's so many things unknown. The thing about human beings that what makes them interesting is that they can also be they are predictable, but they're also unpredictable. And you got to kind of see it just like a beehive, right? When the bees create the beehive, it's not like one bee can come and say change the whole beehive. So when I look at current human civilization, I'm not just seeing human beings, uh, alone. I'm seeing human beings that have, in some sense, integrated into a system. That means the ability for human beings to drive is actually pretty advanced. I do something that, like, if people want to know how I inspire myself, I pretty much in my inner realms change my audience. What does that mean? That means I can imagine my ancestors staring at me right now. I could feel their judgment. I could imagine the future generations who haven't been born yet staring at me right now, judging me. I can feel the system admin of this world reviewing me, you know? And so, in accordance to these abstract considerations of intelligent attention upon me, the behavior changes. That means, it's like an advanced civilization, and a truly advanced human civilization would be even a civilization where if a time traveler came in the future, from the future or from the past, it would still be advanced. That means its engagement with reality is advanced. Its value of the human being is advanced. And really, the sentence, they lived for us, so we would live for them. It's like people care from where they came from, but we actually came from the effort of the species before we were born. You understand what I'm trying to tell you? I'm saying that the level of honor for being a human being, part of the human species, is absent
It's way more easier for people saying I want power or that rather than being like I need to my species needs to be powerful. People aren't trying to be wise. They're not thinking my species needs to be wise. You understand all the stuff that all the advice we're applying on an individualistic level. Now we've reached a point where we got to start seeing it through the eyes of the species. That means before somebody goes to war, imagine this is the issue. The political leaders are not considering the species. Like somebody has to go into the UN and shout as loud as they can, you're all members of the human species. You understand? It's like different businesses in the same industry. Sure, they're competing over resources and market share, but at the same time, what if the whole industry gets wiped out? Like there has to be 100% business case studies, where two businesses in an industry fought with each other and none of them succeeded. See, it's kind of weird. It's like we can't, it's kind of like at the same time, human beings are putting an effort to conquer the world, the unknown world. The world is also conquering them. If you decide not to do anything, excuse me, the world is going to move, and you don't know how the world is going to move. What I mean by the world, that means like if a person doesn't critically think about something, and critical thinking means you just start from scratch. Okay, just assume that nobody knows, and then you'll suddenly notice you have a sharpened attention. That's my attitude. I assume that every person I meet could be wrong, and I assume also I could be wrong. But I also consider that truth doesn't necessarily care for my opinion. That means my emotions and thoughts are just one corner of this manifestation. And should I limit all of reality to my corner of manifestation? Like I'm not, it's like I think when you're young, you play like team games in your mind, but eventually you begin to see the system is way more sophisticated than just command-based change. You understand? God was such a higher power that God said be and existence was. But man is not a higher power, you know? I mean, compared to like ants, we are, but compared to what else there is, it isn't. And the most logical and reasonable view is to acknowledge that we're not the highest power. I think that's stupid, personally. I think the ego knows it's hollow. I think everybody knows the meaning that they're putting on reality. And so the question comes, what meaning? Okay, let me bring the notepad here. Okay. Guys, before this, actually, I prepared something. I'm going to read that for you. Um, Before this lecture, I asked ChatGPT, what does honor mean exactly? Give me the most advanced, deepest philosophical and psychological view. I was curious to know how honor is understood. AI says honor in its deepest philosophical and psychological dimensions is not just a social code or cultural virtue. It is a binding contract between the self and its highest ideal, often maintained regardless of external validation or consequence. Guys, that's an incredible definition. So I'm pretty much saying they live in honor of us, That means our ancestors, they had the highest ideal. Like, no, man, we're going to live for people in 2025. We're not going to make it there, but we're going to get them there, right? And so they lived for that themselves in the past. Of our ancestors lived for their highest ideal, which was now, and they maintained that ideal regardless of external validation. You know what that means? That means if truly, like, I personally feel I have a connection to the highest ideal of like this, what the species is potential. I don't know why. Something to me out of this life, like, to be honest, the greatest blessing I've received was I was called towards the system admin. That was a blessing. But prior to that, I was, some part of me couldn't let me, you know, let this, like, I don't know, like, some part of me will feel like a failure if my species doesn't activate its potential. You understand? It's kind of like, imagine seeing a human being and they're a great musician, but they never play in front of people. They never pursue it. Okay. And so it's as if, in the same way, where if they never pursued it and then they could never play music, like, let's say they got super old or something, then you'd be like, why? You could have, your potential was always there. Why did you not activate it? And that's the feeling I'm trying to kind of make my species avoid. That at the end of our lives, we do not leave this world as if, like, man, it was a bad place. Like, you know what I mean? We leave this world that was as if it was, we left it better than when we entered. Like, all parents, for example, want the best for their children. Now, if they see that deeper, the best for their children would be a best world. You understand what I mean? That means parents, like, put a lot of time trying to make their kids. All right, let's keep going with this. I'm going to keep reading the thing that ChatGPT says, because I asked it, what does honor mean exactly? And ChatGPT says philosophical view, meta ethical and existential layers. Honor as moral autonomy. I'm reading this. Honor can be seen as self imposed ethical discipline. In Kantian terms, it is the will acting out of duty to a self chosen moral law, not due to fear or desire. A person of honor doesn't simply follow rules, they live by a code that reflects their commitment to universal moral worth. Kant says, act so that your actions could be made into a universal law. Wow. Wow. Which implies honor is the felt responsibility to live by the maxim even when unseen. Yeah, it's like the main statement, the first statement. Okay, so then we go to honor as ontological integrity. Existentialists like Sartre and Camus might view honor as maintaining consistency between your freedom, your choices, and your being. It is not about obeying others, it's staying whole in your actions, not fragmenting yourself for convenience. Dishonor, then, is self betrayal. You lie to yourself and split your soul. So, Dear viewers, I'm making the claim that because the honor for the species is not present in our species in 25, in some sense, every soul has in some sense betrayed itself by not acknowledging the greater group identity. We are not nationalistic entities only. We are all nations are sub-nations of the nation of humanity, the species. That means immediately. That means how do you in some sense assemble your army? Common value. Do you know? And now in politics, they make the common value. There's an enemy going to come and kill you. Everybody fight for that. But the issue is, what if we are the enemy? What if human beings have to fight against their own crooked nature? Do you know? That means, what if the enemy is you being distracted and not living your most advanced life? You know what I'm saying here? So we go to the third point: honor as a virtue of character. In virtue ethics, for example, Aristotle, honor is a reflection of aret, which means excellence in being. It is not what others give you, it's the nobility you embody. Honor arises when courage, justice, and truthfulness are harmonized. True honor isn't earned by winning, it's sustained by how you conduct yourself in both defeat and triumph. So you got to find your courage, and you got to find justice, and you got to find your truthfulness, and they got to harmonize. So when you think about courage, like, don't think I'm the bravest person, but when it's out of necessity, the courage comes. You know, the best definition I've heard from courage, honestly, the best insight I have of it, there was this anime character named Armin Artlet or something. And this character was a coward, but he was super smart. He was like the smartest character in the show, one of the smartest characters in the show. And I think Zeke might have been smarter. But, anyways, so Armin, this character is a coward. He's scared, but he's also honorable. Okay. And so there's a scene where he's making the sacrifice. He's like sacrificing himself for the greatness of like their victory. Okay. Their battalion's victory. And there's a scene where he just looks at his best friend, and his best friend knows that he's making the sacrifice. And he says, "It's strange. I feel courage flowing through me." Did you hear that? It's not that you suddenly have courage. It activates in you when something is important enough to activate for. All right, we keep going. The psychological view. So that was the philosophical view. Now we're going to the psychological view: depth, psychology, and human development. So, first point: honor as ego transcendence. From a Jungian lens, honor can symbolize the mature ego's alignment with the self, the archetype of wholeness. It involves resisting the shadow, shame, deceit, cowardice, and integrating moral opposites. An honorable an honorable person carries their shadow consciously, but acts in service of something greater than ego. That's the point. Like, if you don't believe, like, for religious people, God is greater than their ego. Islam, the word Islam means submission of ego. Okay. And now, um, for people who are not religious, well, guess what? You have humanity to live for that's greater than you. Until you realize there is a system admin here. But anyways, until you do, live for humanity, live for the greatness of all of us, live for all those human beings, live for all the smart and stupid and evil and good people, because they are people, because they are humans, because the human design is worthy to continue, because we will be advanced one day. And right now we might be planting the seeds, but it doesn't mean we in our minds we can't climb those trees. Then we go to 3, honor and identity stability. Erickson's stages of development suggest honor contributes to identity cohesion. A person with honor acts in alignment with their core identity, while dishonorable acts lead to guilt, shame, and internal fragmentation. Honor provides a compass during moral storms, anchoring one's identity in meaning, not outcome. And so let me tell you this, a human being in 2025 on earth, life might suddenly push you into a corner where you feel valueless, hopeless, powerless, infinitesimal. You feel like you can't do anything. But it is in moments like these, it is sometimes in the lowest moments of our life that we access the highest ideals that will revolutionize our lives. That means it's like this. It's like a person thinks they are, let's say, worse. I mean, what's the worst thing that can happen in culture, right? For emotionally, a person feels like they're a loser. They feel they're lost. Okay, and it's like you're in a lost world, in a lost environment, in a lost place, until a part of you suddenly realizes what would be the opposite of this I am, of this archetype I'm entertaining. That means if you right now feel like a coward, okay, the system admin has given us a mind that can actually create models of it. That means it's like if somebody is scared, like it would be equivalent to like close your eyes and imagine all the different scenarios you're scared. And then try to imagine slowly but surely that fear is just an interaction of force. That means a way I kind of got over some of my fears was to be like, bro, at the end of this is just, it's just shape and geometry. That means, let's say a human being is like enemy. I have an enemy. Okay, so that enemy is just a form. It's just a form. It's just a system. It's like when somebody says, I hate that person. What? You're hating a system? Like, we must practice from hating ourselves, hating our species, hating our world, and even being foolish enough to hate the system admin to realize it's in some sense the activation code to the opposite. Do you know there's something going on in this world where people who were loved when they were young don't know its value, and people who in some sense were hated when they were young don't know its value? I firmly believe human beings can become numb to reality. And the way they become numb is because they're getting high on their own ego. Do you know, let me say it this way. If you had an option between living for an idea, living for an object, or living for something that was alive beyond both, like, do you know, even if I hate human beings, like if somebody hates human beings, it's like we don't know how human beings will be. It's like you don't punish the father for this, excuse me, you don't punish the son for the sin of the father. And we shouldn't hate humanity because, I don't know, maybe we hate something in our experience. And it's honestly our value, you know? It's like if I ask you who you are, does it go as far as you telling me your name and your backstory? Or are we going to acknowledge we're all members of a species and it's the first time we're experiencing collective expressions of the species. That means, like, do you know what I mean? We're living in the first prototype of what civilization looks like an early prototype. This is pretty much the best our ancestors could do. Now, the question comes, okay, that our ancestors lived for us. Now we need to live for them, but the question is it's much deeper because it's not the same world, it's not the same values. Like, I might have similar genetics to my ancestors, but I don't have their similar values. And that's where you kind of get proof of the soul. Do you know what I mean? Because it's in some sense getting influenced by abstractions, regardless of what's existentially there. You know? There was this scene in Game of Thrones, if I remember correctly, where Tyrion Lannister was like the hand of the king or something, and their kingdom was at war from like Stannis, I think. You know, and there's this scene where Tyrion says, "There's people coming to kill us. Let's go kill them." And then they all kind of like find the courage to go to war. Okay, they find the motivation to go to battle, right? And it's kind of like, I don't want to say it's similar to that. I'm seeing that as a metaphor, but it's like, hey, we're human beings. There's an advanced civilization here. Let's advance. Just wonder about what's the most advanced self species world and relationship with the original power as a simulated entity. Like, I'll give you an example. If right now extraterrestrials attacked humans, okay, or in my science fiction, I've written about classrooms in the future where it's like the classroom is, imagine the classroom is, I don't know, 30 students, 20 of them are aliens. I don't know, seven of them are like humans, and three of them are like android children, AI. And imagine in that classroom, like an alien starts like beating up another human. Okay, the humans would be like, you would feel an affinity for that which is like you. I mean, isn't it crazy? People fight for their loved ones. Do you know what I mean? Because you truly care for them. Similarly, why are we not truly caring for the advancement of civilization? And let me tell you why. Because it's not as real as someone standing in front of us. But that's where people like podcasters come in. They talk about it so much. That means I was like, okay, God, I'm kind of getting the clues. You gave me a visual mind. Okay, you put a microphone in front of me and you showed me how an advanced civilization is. Okay, it's obvious, you know? And the idea is trying to get whatever human state of mind that's here now to be like, what if there is more than my story? What if I am not as important as the greatness of the whole system? See, honor is that ideal, right? Like for me, I have an honor of trying to complete these talks, and also because I have an OCD in it. Okay, I have a sort of ideological OCD. That means I can't, like, just like a neat freak. If I see language like, how do I say it? I have a love and hate relationship with language, in the sense that language is, it can be a cage, but it can also be a bridge. I want to see it. I want to see that day where everybody wakes up and I'm like, yo, is everybody's eyes glowing white, like glowing white light? It's as if like advanced activation of the entity, you know? Anyways, our ancestors lived for us. They did a nice gesture. We as human beings in 2025 have class and style, and we're gonna, you know, reciprocate. Okay. And what does that mean? That means like my enemy, like let's say I don't have enemies, but I'm saying if like, I've seen Vinland Saga. Nobody has enemies, you know? But I'm saying if if let's say I created an opponent in my mind, how do I know my opponents, the person who I hate and is my enemy, how do I know their far ancestors weren't best friends with my ancestors? How do I know? You know what I mean? Like, dude, they might have. Somebody who I might not get along now, maybe my ancestors were buddies with their ancestors. So, on some level, I cannot ignore how everybody contributed before, like, I'll say it this way, before my parents existed, which gave birth to me. I cannot ignore how every human being on earth that cared for earth contributed to this system. And then my parents were born, and then I was born. Do you see what I'm saying? So you have to honor the effort that human beings you will never know in the past did for you, like lived, how they lived for you. And now, believe it or not, one of the most advanced activities is not to live for yourself alone or just your little group, but to live for your species. That means, like if I have kids, they're going to be raised with such a high value for their species. Do you know what I mean? That means they're going to understand an advanced civilization is the greatest outcome. It's the greatest argument, okay? After the greatest argument, which is we're in a simulation and you need the system admin's help to get out. So there's something more important than civilization, which is the freedom, which is the return of the soul to the original. But for now that we're in the simulation, we're going to update this. Like Jordan Peterson, he went to people and it's like, yo, clean your room, kids. It's like, buddy, the species needs to clean its room. You're confused. And even though he thinks that individuals, like you got to start individualistically. Like if you hear Jordan Peterson talk, he's going to say like, how does North Korea change? People got to start cleaning their rooms. It's a matter of updating the system that has been giving you the values that you have been living in accordance to. And I want you to have heard this. I have no clue who you are, who will be listening to this, but as one human being, as one member of the human species, I have prayed for all of you. I have prayed for the most advanced to happen, just for it to have been there. I'm like, okay, I don't know how many people are praying for the advancement of civilization, but I will. But ultimately, it's not in our hands. Anyways, thank you for listening. You might not know who your ancestors were. You might not know who my ancestors were. You might not know who 8 billion other people's ancestors were, but they lived for you. They lived for you. They didn't even realize it, but they indirectly lived for you. They lived for a better world. The person who invented the car, invented everything, like all the human made inventions, they lived for you. Now, what are you living for? Do you just accept it? Do you just choose to be ignorant of the great amount of effort that was put into this world? Or do we feel powered and empowered and honored by it? Do you know what it means? It means that if if suddenly a great warrior, like imagine there's a battle, like we've seen this in movies so many times, okay, and then there's this one warrior that's like going berserk, right? And all the other warriors in the battlefield feel strengthened by that. I recommend people watching the Kingdom series on Netflix. Like I'm into, yeah, this is very personal, but I'm into those like Chinese films where it's all about like energy cultivation and like martial arts, you know? those films are just, they keep you sane. Seeing a Chinese, warrior jump in the air and like kick like 20 people at the same time somehow is so comforting for the soul. Pretty much this lecture, the point of it was begin feeling your species, begin expanding the territories of your empathy, begin caring for the might of humanity. You know, I personally believe when a person gets frustrated, a sort of might comes. You know, when your boundaries as an entity are pushed, like a force comes, backup force. I mean, technically, our bodies are, we see it as life forms, forms of life. And the mind that moves the body, we see it as, a force of life, a life force. So your mind is a life force, is a verb. Your body is a life form, it's a noun. The life force is moving the life form, but before it moves it, it's valuing it. And what you need to do as a human being is not to go in nature and meditate on like, yo man, is everything oneness? That doesn't even, like, that's not the point. That's a deviation. Be careful. Spirituality is one of the most advanced forms of egotism, because you are still seeking the power of self. You haven't understood the limitations. That means, think of it this way: if you are more excited by your limitlessness than your limitation, you kind of are slightly immature. And people are going to be like, F you, man, who the hell are you to say this? And I'll be like, I'm sorry, it's kind of like, you tell me, is someone being responsible for just themselves more advanced, or somebody being responsible for themselves and others more advanced, or someone being responsible for themselves, for their self, their others, and their world is more advanced? Do you know those beings are called stewards of the world? For example, people saw Greta Thunberg and they're like, yo, this, like they thought she's talking too much, but they didn't understand. She was a rare soul that was a steward of the earth. That means the world had more value to her than the systems giving the world value. Do you know what I mean? But human beings are different. For example, me, I care for the world, but the world's legacy is less of a concern to me than the legacy of humanity, simply because we how what it means to be human is different. It's going to be different. Like what it means to be a human being in 2025 is very different in regards to what it's going to mean to be a human being in the year 2225. Do you understand? It's most likely going to be more of an idea. That means we're living in a world right now where we have nature and we have the unnatural. One can make the argument that language is unnatural, okay? And so, if we're creatures that are focusing on our communication intelligence, most likely our minds are going to move faster than our bodies. And if our minds move faster than our bodies, they're not going to need a body. So, in the future, to be a human being doesn't necessarily mean you need to have a body to be a human. Okay, but now it's important that you have you are that what's being defined as the human is in some sense a natural being. Do you understand? That means we were not created with like wires and metal. We were biological organisms. We were forged in this world by a power beyond it. I think that's a really cool way to say it. So they lived for us, so we would live for them, which means they all lived for the far future. So you got to live for the far future, or you're an oblivious human being in a box. And it's okay. You can get angry at me, you know, because I'm telling you, the advancement of humanity, it's not like I would advance humanity at all costs. If they were like, yo, um, all human beings will become cyborgs, but you'll get to see an advanced civilization, I'll be like, bad deal. That's not the most advanced. You know, like in the future, what human beings are going to put chips in their brain, and what you got to pay a membership fee to access intelligence? That's bullshit. You know, that means even if human beings are cyborgs, we're going to have like these, man, we're going to have cultural bias. That means people are going to treat cyborg humans um, kind of racist. But you can't ignore that. Human beings are, see, the thing is that if we treat the human being like an animal, if the animal doesn't understand what it's looking at, it attacks it. Okay? If people don't understand you, which is another way of saying they can't accept you, they attack you. I've seen this happen. But there is also an ability to disarm. Let me tell you a freaky thing that happened. This happened actually 2 weeks ago when I was giving a talk in my car outside of my apartment. Okay, and it was at night. It was like 2 a.m. And guys, imagine my window. So I'm sitting in my car in the driver's seat. My left window is down completely. I have a cigarette in my hand. I look to my left. This random person with a stick or some metal pipe or something just like was outside of my car window. And the person looks at me and says, "Can you give me a ride?" With like a weapon in his hand. Okay. And I just looked at him for a second and I'm like, yeah, man, if you go ask there at that building, they're going to help you. And then I quickly closed the window and I left that place. And it was as if, like, to be honest, that person seemed possessed to me. Do you know what possession means? Possession means it's not human values that are moving the entity, it's something else. It means that they're so oblivious to how they're being a self in the moment that something else was like, look at this loser. I'm going to come and take you. I'm going to come and move this entity. You know what I mean? So you got to be careful. It's not just because we think that there's like only humans and squirrels and birds or something like that. Like we don't freak out, but you got to understand that you're living an inner life. Well, then you got to ask, if I'm living an inner life, where is that inner life? It's in an inner world. Now, then you got to ask, what's in my inner world? That means if in my outer life, in my outer world, there's like a cheetah or there's like, vicious animals or something, what's the sort of danger in my inner life? People don't think about that, right? But the danger in regards to the inner life is to, in some sense, be trapped by it. So I'm telling you, sometimes being a simpler person could be way more advanced than being complex in the wrong way. And ask yourself, what are you truly living for here? And if you don't have an answer, go look in the mirror until you do. You see that it's your species you're living for. That means an advanced being will do an action that contributes to the whole species, not just one member of the species, you know? And to some degree, isn't it weird? Like the clues are obvious. We're temporarily here, we're simulated. It's like a freelance job. You understand? We've been hired to, in some sense, be in the system, pass the test of the system, update the system, and leave. And then we're going to be reviewed. How do you perform? And for an intelligent world to have a review system, it means it's advanced. So to me, what the kind of, it's bizarre, but it's like the way I found courage from the notion of the system admin was that it's being administered before I have to push the burden of everything onto myself. Anyways, thank you for listening. They lived for us, so we would live for them, but not the them that were in the past. It's not like in the future we're going to have a technology that's going to suddenly bring every person back to life and it's like they lived for us, so we would kind of give them eternal life. It's not that kind of situation. It's more that we are living. When I say they lived for us, they were living for the value of us. and we need to consider their value, but we do not need to be blindsided, by how they weren't aware of reality as much as we are, right? Like in 2025, human beings have way more global familiarity with different cultures than, for example, like 100 years ago. And when you look at it, it's like from the past there were biases, and the biases keep breaking. In the same way two people get to know each other and understand each other's values and difference in behavior, in the same way nations have to become friends until they realize they're all the children in a classroom of the nation of humanity. Anyways, thank you for listening. Of course, it's all in the system admin's hands as well. We're in the passenger seat. The system admin's will is the fascinating part of it. Reality, really. Yeah, thank you for listening. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the most benevolent, the most merciful. Auzu billah shaitan rajim. May God protect us from the cursed one and unnecessary ignorance. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. All praise due to the Lord of the worlds. Rabbi Gfirli, my Lord, forgive me. My Lord, forgive my species for all the sins that they are conscious and unconscious of. Ihdina sirat al-mustaqim. May God guide us to the direct path. May God guide the species. May the most advanced guide the species in the most advanced way to the most advanced. I mean, technically, we are returning it's like from the original came a simulation. So the simulation started and ends, but the original doesn't have an ending. So we're returning to the endless. But it's not, we're going to end to return to the endless. The simulation returns to the origin. All right. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Thank you.